Hello and welcome back to the channel where I provide regular cricket content on interesting topics. Today's video is the continuation of my best left-handers of all time series, where today I reveal the top 5. After looking through the comments for the first video, some of you were ridiculously close to guessing my top 5. But at the point of writing, no one has all 5. I do have a confession to make, however. After putting out the first video I realized I had cocked up. When making these videos I had originally planned to have it as a top 15. But when I looked at my top 15, it would have included profiles on a number of players I have recently presented in depth. The likes of Cook, Smith and Gilchrist. But I didn't want to bore you all talking about the same old players, so I cut it down to a 10. I then inadvertently chopped out some people who I should have included in the 10 to 6 video. But bugger it, you live and you learn. What I would say is that my top 5 had always been set in stone. It was between 6 and 15 where I was jiggling people around. Who did make the top 5 then? Shall we find out? Number 5, Graham Pollock. Some people criticize me on the channel for too much recency bias when picking my top players. Whilst this perhaps proves those critics wrong, that is not my goal. Pollock is in the list on merit for being one of the most talented left-handers of all time. If you don't believe me, perhaps you may take on board the opinion of Don Bradman. The Don once described Pollock as only having one left-handed equal in the game. His only equal being a man who may appear later in the list. Pollock scored his maiden first-class century when he was just 16, and then posted his first Test 100 at 19 in Australia. The South African had the crucial mix of timing and power, meaning that in his 23 Test career his talent was fully on show. Although his Test career was cut short due to the South African sporting ban, he still managed to plunder over 2,250 runs at an average of 61. At that rate he would have smashed all kinds of records had he been allowed to fulfill his potential. Overall though, although his Test career was short, his talent was fully displayed to the world, and he is a worthy number 5 in this list. Number 4, Wasim Akram. The last bowler on my list, Akram was the reason I decided to include them. How can you even mention left-handed cricketers without drawing attention to the fast bowling menace from Pakistan? When he tore onto the scene, he and Waqar Younis forged possibly the greatest opening bowling pair of all time. Whilst Younis faded as his career went on, Akram used his skill and cricketing smarts to continue to terrorise batting lineups for many years. Coming in off a short run, covering the ball with his opposite hand, he would rush the batsman with his extremely fast arm. He had many variations, but possibly his most deadly delivery was the toe-crushing, late-swinging Yorker to right-handers. Overall Akram took 414 wickets at an average of just over 23, with performances good enough to win Man of the Match awards 17 times. Not only was he a nightmare for batsmen, he could also give it an almighty crack with the bat too. For his contributions over a 16-year Test career, Akram is a worthy number 4 in this list. Now we are down to what I believe to be 3 of the best players to have ever picked up a bat. Most of the guesses included these 3 men, but here is my order. Number 3, Brian Lara. Quite frankly, if you didn't enjoy watching Brian Lara bat, you don't like cricket. He had everything, from the extravagant drives to boundary board damaging hooks and pulls. He was a fine player of spin, using his feet with ease, but he could also take on the best quicks of his time as well. Lara could dig in or he could let loose. He really did have it all. Has there ever been a bigger run scorer once set either? Anyone who scored 375 and 400 not out in Test cricket is pretty special. Not only that, he is the only player to have scored over 500 in a first-class innings also. The West Indies legend also had heart in that they were never out of a game when he was at the crease. Perhaps the stat that impressed me the most was that when touring Sri Lanka he obliterated the world record for the highest proportion of runs scored by one player. During a tricky tour he scored 42% of West Indies runs in a series. It's pretty rare that a player scores 42% in one innings, let alone of the course of a series. Lara is a star who blessed cricket with his ability and infectious joy for the game. He is a worthy number 3 in this list. Number 2, Garfield Sobers. A cricketing genius, Sobers excelled at all aspects of the game, and few would argue his claim is the finest all-round player in modern cricket. In fact, in a previous video where I analysed the stats of all the great all-rounders, Sobers came out on top. Born with an extra finger on each hand which was later removed, Sobers seemed to have genetic gifts which set him apart from his peers. He actually excelled in a number of sports, but fortunately for cricket fans, it was our sport he stuck with. And what a record-breaking career he had. Of course, until Brian Lara came along, he had the highest individual score in a test match, scoring 365 against Pakistan. He also was the first player ever to take 6 sixes off and over. In terms of batting, his career netted him over 8,000 runs at an incredible average of 57.8. Bowling-wise, he had a unique ability to bowl fast medium, off and even wrist spin, showcasing what an exceptional individual he was. I referenced earlier that Don Bradman gave his top left-handed players of all time. Naturally, it was Sobers who he ranked as joint top with Pollock. For his incredible all-round abilities and his dominance in the game for a long period, Sobers is my number 2. Number 1, Kumar Sangakkara. When Sangakkara arrived on the scene in his early 20s, it was clear that Sri Lanka had something special on their hands. Their side had traditionally been littered with power hitters such as Sanath Jayasuriya and Aravinda de Silva, but Sanga was different. He caressed the ball around the field using equal measure timing and technique, never seeming to be forcing the ball. Sanga liked to score big runs too. He's second only behind Don Bradman in terms of the most double centuries scored in Test cricket. If any of you are doubting his selection as number 1 here, how are these for some stats? He was the fastest player to every milestone from 8,000 runs all the way to 12,000 runs in the history of the game. Sanga also scored more runs at the difficult number 3 position than any other player in history, and he jointly holds the highest partnership in the game as well. His batting average is 57.4, which comfortably trumps Lara, Kallis and Sachin. Oh yes, he was also a very tidy wicketkeeper also. His overall record is staggering, and Sanga was a joy to watch ply his trade. Taking everything into account, I believe him to be the greatest left-hander to ever play the game. That wraps up this list, and what a group of players it is. I could take arguments for different combinations of the top 3, but I am happy with my order. Let rip in the comments then, people. Who would you have as number 1? I think Lara will be popular, but for me the all-round abilities of Sanga and Sobers just nudge him down. As ever, thank you for watching and participating.